Welcome to the Childbirth Attorney podcast. I am your host, Gina Mundy. As an attorney specializing in childbirth cases, I have analyzed almost every aspect of labor and delivery for over 21 years. About 19 years deep into my profession, I made the decision not only to get involved in the aftermath of something going wrong, but to get involved before childbirth to help parents prevent the mistakes and complications I've seen and have a healthy baby. In June 2023, I published the book, A Parent's Guide to a Safer Childbirth. This podcast is a continuation of my book. It's a continuation of my mission to help parents have a healthy baby. Keep in mind, my book and my podcast is not about what can go wrong. It's how to make sure it goes right on one of the biggest days of your life. So whether you're expecting a baby, planning to have a baby in the future, or just passionate about making childbirth safer for all, this podcast is for you. So please join me as we start this journey for a safer childbirth.
But the best way to figure out how your baby is doing is their heart rate. That pain, it changes the state of mind you're in. It is your wife who makes decisions during childbirth. The Childbirth Attorney podcast, hosted by Gina Mundy.
Welcome, everybody. I am super excited for our guest today. As many of you know, as a childbirth attorney, I am a huge fan of doulas. If you have a good doula, if you have the right doula, it is so great because you have such a great chance of having a healthy baby. They do so many great things. So as the second episode in my podcast, of course, I had to have one of my favorite doulas on to talk more about what she does for her clients and how that can help them have a safer childbirth. So, Kristen, how are you?
Doing well. Good to see you again, Gina.
Oh, same. So, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about yourself?
So yes, I am an elite certified birth doula, also a certified postpartum doula and newborn care specialist. I teach childbirth classes, pretty much all of the trainings that are non-medical in the birth and baby space I've taken at one point or the other. And I started my doula agency, which is located in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in 2015. But I've been doing the work coming on 11 years between teaching and birth doula work. And my agency is a one-stop shop from conception through the first year. But with our sleep consulting services, we do work up to age 5.
Oh, I love that. Great. And I think even more importantly, and I know we're getting into it later, but you also just authored a book, and the book, supported a guide to birth and baby. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
I love it. And then you also have a podcast.
Yes.
Doulas. I love that. And that's actually how we met, was on your podcast.
I loved having you on, and it is one of our top rated podcasts. We get a lot of listens even after the fact. And so, yes, Ask the Doula started as a radio show in 2017 and then turned into a podcast. So we've been early podcasters.
Oh, that is great. I'm on my second episode. You're the guest. So
I'm excited for you. It's so great.
Right? Yeah, this is, it's going to be interesting. I think we talked about it in pre-show. I woke up after my nap at 8 a.m. and basically just decided this is going to be Gina Raw. This is more mom to mom. So this is not the stiff childbirth attorney that, many of you've seen me in other shows. But I don't know if I'm that stiff, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so I'm excited for our talk. And yes, we did have a good podcast. But let me ask you, what inspired you to be a doula?
Honestly, I had children later in life. I worked in political fundraising with my first pregnancy, and I didn't have a whole lot of support options in my own community. I didn't know what doulas were until my second birth when I hired doulas. But I ended up talking to a lot of friends and gathering information from my own network And many of my friends had kids earlier in life. And so even some of their information was outdated. And I ended up switching providers, found a supportive provider earlier in my pregnancy, and then took a Lamaze class with both of my births and felt very prepared. My husband also felt very prepared to support me in that way. And so after I had my second child, I started teaching classes, and that was more of a hobby. I still had a career, but my students wanted me to be their birth doula, and I wasn't certain that I wanted to go into that work, but the on-call lifestyle can be challenging. But I took a training and attended my first birth and fell in love with the work and realized the importance of supporting families in that non-medical way and the connection with teaching classes and supporting in the hospital or home. And then certainly when I later got trained as a postpartum doula, continuing that care even further.
So why don't you explain to us a little bit, what is a doula? What is it that you do for and we'll talk about specifically your clients that are in labor, and actually even what you do for them, I should say too, during pregnancy, because I know obviously you guys work hard to get them ready for the big day.
Yes. So we support our clients at Gold Coast. It's a little bit different than some doulas who work in a solo capacity, but from the moment a contract is signed, we are on call. Many doulas do not begin their call for clients until 38 weeks to 42. But at Gold Coast, we work with high-risk clients, twins, triplets. And so we want to give them assurance that a doula will be there no matter when they arrive. And we create a strong relationship with the couple throughout pregnancy. We're there as a resource if they need referrals for, say, physical therapy or a swim class that's safe to take in pregnancy, or if they are looking for a pediatrician or childcare, we're there as that resource. And certainly that emotional support, if they're having a bad day, we're there for them as well. And if they have conversations with their provider and they need evidence-based information to continue that discussion, then the doula would be available to provide information that they can then use. We support whatever decisions a couple make in pregnancy, birth, and early parenting, but we're able to give them information so they feel like they're making informed decisions. So in pregnancy, again, if they're having discussions with their provider, we can help them create a birth plan or get them some information to bring into a prenatal. And during labor, if interventions come up that are not emergent, we're able to give them the risks, benefits, alternatives to any potential intervention so they feel like they can slow it down and talk through the information.
That's amazing. And I'll tell you, that's amazing because, the delivery team, typically with the exception of their doctor, I mean, those are just the people who are scheduled to work that day. So if they're in childbirth and they're being given options, usually doctor is not there unless they're picking up a 12-hour shift. They're talking to the people who, again, are scheduled to work that day. So having that personal, relationship before childbirth with somebody that you trust and that you know and that you like, I'm sure is a much easier, better conversation, to have with a parent than if they're trying to talk to somebody now they've met for the very first time.
Exactly. And you may love your provider, but they may not be on call when you go into labor. So you need to create a new connection. Again, they come in and out of your room, and you may love your nurse and be able to attune to them quickly, but they could have a shift change. And then again, there's a new nurse. So your doula is someone who is a trusted resource. And the earlier you hire a doula, the stronger your connection to her, or there are male doulas, to your doula would be.
Oh, I always say she would doulas. I'll have to change that. So see, I'm learning so much about doulas. One thing we talked about, in your podcast, is that childbirth attorneys do not know much about doulas. Well, hold on, where we are now, because a lot more people are using them and whatnot. But I should talk about more professionally, because in our cases, and remember, if there's a case, then something did not go right. But in 21 years that I have done these childbirth cases, I have never had a doula involved in a case. And last week, I was actually talking to an attorney I went to law school with who does the same work as me. And I remember going, well, in the doula, talking about like a podcast or something. And he goes, Gina, what's a doula? And I'm like, I know, right? I'm like, it's great. I'm like, they help to bring babies into this world safely. And he's like, no, what do they do, Gina? And, and we went over a little bit about your role and basically a lot of stuff that you said when you have a good doula. And then, of course, I had to mention that, all 3 of my children will have doulas.
I love it.
I don't care if I have to pay for them. And since you're my home state, maybe I can get them lucky and they'll be on the west side.
Yes.
Yeah. So you just mentioned birth plan also. And I think birth plans are just huge. I mean, probably on your podcast, I'm known for saying this as an attorney and specializing in childbirth. I have a different spin on birth plans, more like it's the act of preparing the plan and getting ready. That's the important part of the plan. And just understanding that obviously childbirth is very unpredictable. So
It is.
So, knowing what you may have to make decisions on. And quickly, again, you're in labor, you're in a different state of mind. So getting ready for that big day is huge. So I love that you guys do the plans with your patients. If you had, and I know there's so many things that can go into a plan, kind of your top couple things that you would make sure were included in a plan, like top 3.
It all depends on your unique goals. So I would say, many hospitals have a template, which makes it simpler, and you can just check boxes of things that, you would agree with, and the nurse is used to the template. But in my experience as a doula supporting clients, I find that plan is a great way to see if your OB or midwife, if you're on the same page, and have that discussion during pregnancy to see if you're both in agreement and if your provider supports your wishes. So it could be on induction unless it's medically necessary, newborn procedures, whatever it might be, just wanting to be home as long as possible before going in. Some of those important, factors. And there are many things that are on birth plans, say when I had my kids, who are now 11 and 13, that aren't as necessary. A lot of hospitals support that skin to skin time unless there's an issue with mom or baby immediately after. And some of that was very important to add into birth plans in the past. And many hospitals in Michigan are baby friendly, for example, and they do support breastfeeding and giving that education immediately after the birth.
Nice. So one thing that I talk about a lot in the childbirth cases is that sometimes when there's mistakes or complications, something happens, the unit is very busy. Because again, I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, babies come when they want to come. So they could, a unit can get busy pretty quick. It's not like a surgical center, a different part of the hospital where they have scheduled surgeries, they staff accordingly. Labor and delivery units can be a little bit different. So when you have a client and they're at the hospital, they're in labor, unit's jammed. I mean, what are you doing then for your patients?
So
our clients.
Yeah, our clients, we're providing them that emotional support. Doula work is also very physical. So some of that hands-on support, we can also show partners how to do some of our labor massage techniques, hip squeezes, counter pressure, whether the client has an epidural or not. Now, if an epidural is placed, we do work with the nurse. We don't move our clients without the nurse's assistance, but we're able to hit the call button and someone will come into the room to help us if we want to keep labor moving, if baby's very high and we're trying to get into different positions with our client to help labor progress without, again, any interventions that the client is not wishing to have at that time.
Right. Do you sit in on a lot of Pitocin inductions, or a lot of your clients' Pitocin inductions?
Yeah, I have, certainly. So for various reasons, and Pitocin is a very gradual process. It can be turned off. And so, yes.
When you have those inductions and they're longer like that, I mean, are you guys at the hospital most of the time, or do you come in at a certain point?
It depends. And with Pitocin, it can be tricky. So I talked to my team. I have 26 contractors between sleep consultants, lactation, birth and postpartum doulas, and we try to make sure that we are, if we're not in the hospital, that we're on high alert because things can change very quickly with Pitocin. And so all of a sudden baby's there, or maybe baby isn't responding, or mom isn't responding, and we want to be in the hospital. So even if a client isn't very dilated, we're often there supporting them for that reason, that we wouldn't want to miss their birth.
Oh, nice. So if you know one of your clients is going to have an elective Pitocin induction at 39 weeks, my understanding is that, the last few years, those are becoming more and more common. And just so the audience understands, when we say Pitocin, though, that is the drug that makes your uterus contract. Basically, it induces your labor. But by making uterus contract, your baby's supposed to follow along, or your body follows along with the cues, and then baby, is still supposed to be born sometime later. So anyway, but when you have a client who's going to undergo a Pitocin induction, let's say it's just elective, do you prepare them during the pregnancy for it?
Yes, we talk about coping with Pitocin versus coping with your body going into labor on its own, and resources if they're not ready yet, they're not showing signs of dilation, or baby's really high and their cervix isn't really soft, then we'll talk about different options. Seeing an acupuncturist, going to a Webster certified chiro, trying to get their body as ready as possible before the induction. And so again, giving them evidence-based information to talk to their provider about the necessity and why an intervention like having Pitocin would be recommended for them. And so they feel like they're understanding and, again, making informed choices versus everything just happening to them and going along with the flow.
Right, right. And I've talked about this a lot in podcasts like yours and in a lot of other podcasts. But, in the childbirth cases, Pitocin is by far the number one most common fact and issue in a baby case. So that means if there is a mistake or complication, typically Pitocin is involved. And Pitocin, those contractions are hard on mom. So
Very.
Yeah, they're very intense. So typically in the cases, mom will then get an epidural.
Yes.
And, but I think the audience and everybody has to understand that, mom's lucky because contractions suck. So mom can get some relief with an epidural, but contractions also suck for baby. And
yes.
So
not all babies respond well to the contractions being so close together with Pitocin.
Right. So it's incredibly, just important that parents, have an understanding of that. Now, when Pitocin, so I have obviously talked to, delivery teams, doctors, and whatnot for the past 21 years about this drug, researched this drug more than probably anybody, because I then have to cross-examine people on this drug and whatnot. So I will say that in the medical community, the use of Pitocin across the board is, okay, it's safe. And I agree with that. It can be safe. And it can be a really good option for a mom, depending on what's going on, especially if it's something that's, medically necessary. But where there's a disagreement with Pitocin and where it becomes an issue in the case is the administration of Pitocin. And, I'll tell you, different doctors, different ways they're going to order it. And not only that, it's the labor and delivery nurse that's really running the pit induction. Now,
Right.
following the orders, however, I've talked to the nurses. I mean, I'll have a nurse, for instance, she, right before shift change, she's, Pitocin's going pretty good. And then shift change, new nurse comes on and she's like, and she's like, cuts the pit in half, So it's, definitely different ways. So do you talk to your clients about like Pitocin administration? I mean, conceptually, I think it's pretty easy. I mean, most doctor orders go to 20. You typically start at 1. You can go 1, 2, 3, or you can go, doctors sometimes go 2, 4, 6.
Right.
And then the length of time. Do you talk with your clients about, stuff like that, or having them talk to their doctor about it before the induction?
Yeah, so we encourage our clients to take a comprehensive childbirth class. At Gold Coast, we offer hypnobirthing. It's very mind-body focused, goes into all of the medical interventions, the pain relief options. And so there's a good understanding of what would happen in any sort of intervention, including Pitocin or the different types of inductions. Not all inductions involve Pitocin.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a cervical ripener.
Those are the ripener, like
or Foley bulb.
Right.
Or breaking, the back of water. There's so many different things that could be done. But Pitocin, if the contractions aren't longer, stronger, and closer together, and labor's not progressing, then it is an option. It's a good tool to have, as you mentioned, but it should, again, be used wisely. And in the hospitals I work in, it's often a very gradual process. So it's usually, again, one level at a time. And in the earlier stages of, the induction, it's often not uncomfortable until Pitocin gets turned up higher. So with breathing, trying different positions, it can often be managed well early on. And my clients can sleep through the earlier stages, but as it gets turned up higher, it can be more uncomfortable. And an epidural, if it wasn't part of the birth plan, maybe, but I've had clients deliver without any pain management using Pitocin without a problem.
Wow. That's good to know. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who has not had who's had Pitocin and not an epidural.
Yes. And so they were able to move around and keep labor progressing, get our, physical support of hip squeezes and counter pressure. So that was able to help. And certainly if labor is long and they're tired, then an epidural can be can also not only help you sleep and relax, but can also help some people dilate more. And if they're just so tense, an epidural can open them up.
It can also delay labor though too, right?
It can stall labor. It can delay pushing can be much longer. So there are pros and cons to any intervention.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I think, if you roll up to the hospital and if one of the first things they do when you're pregnant, especially at the end, is they'll put on the fetal monitor. And then if there's any concerns about baby, I've always been like, can we skip the epidural? But yeah, you're right. It would help relax them. But, my thing's always, a lot of times it's extended labor. And then that's when baby gets into trouble because they had a harder time pushing and, everything else.
And it could lead to a cesarean because they've been pushing so long and it's not as effective compared to if they had an unmedicated birth and they could really feel as they're pushing. So
another thing that I'm a huge fan of is, and I refer to it as baby advocate.
Yes.
I have a whole chapter in my book on baby advocate because I definitely believe having that second set of eyes on mom and baby is definitely huge. Again, if there is a busy labor and delivery unit and they got to make sure the nurse or doctors being contacted, because this, the unit's busy, everyone's running hard, teams are thinned out a little bit, especially depending on when it is.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, listen, the delivery team, if there's concerns about baby or something's wrong, they're going to beeline for mom and baby versus, somebody else who's stable. But anyway, so I always like the baby advocate part. And I thought, I don't know if advocate's exact right word with the doula, but, I know that if if you're in a busy unit and, you see something concerning, then you can definitely be like, hey, let's hit the call button. But I think more importantly, do you guys, because I think dads, grandmas, I loved how you mentioned the grandparenting classes, just because, I think I wrote my book for a safer childbirth for my children, so I have healthy grandkids. So
Right.
grandma, what, grandmas love my book, by the way, because it really helps to, guide them. So I love it. But anyway, back to baby advocate question. So baby advocate could be, dad, grandma, whatnot. But do you talk to them about kind of you guys all working together
Yes.
to advocate and just watch over, let mom do her thing, and then you guys are kind of there in the background too, making sure everything's good?
Exactly. And we encourage partners to attend childbirth classes like Lamaze, a hospital class, hypnobirthing, gentle birth, whatever they choose. So the partner is as informed as, our client is, and able to help advocate. And then also understanding the birth plan creation, or as we like to call it, to be flexible birth preference sheet. So in the prenatal visit, we go over that. And also just if there's any information, like say an induction is needed, we will get on the phone with our client and explain what that looks like, ask them if they have any questions, have them write down some notes for their next provider appointment to ask some questions and get answers that we can then move forward with a plan.
That's great. I love, I think educating the dads and getting them involved. I firmly believe that in some of my cases that, if dads knew more, that, there may have been a different outcome, because dads instinctively want to protect their wife, protect their baby. They work hard on those nurseries. They want baby to come home and and enjoy the house, and family. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So, I love that you are giving them, to the resources, and you want to include them, because, since I published my book, they're like, well, dad this or dad's that. And I'm like, no, just direct them. They'll do it. They instinctively want to, but they just may not know where to go. So I love the fact that, if they were to hire your services, that you do get them involved and you do work with them, because I'll tell you, they'll be on it. They just have to know. So,
Right. And
yeah.
we're not emotionally invested in the birth. So if a grandparent is attending, they are, struggling with, seeing their daughter in pain, for example, or the husband or partner also has that emotional connection. And it can be hard to support in a judgment-free way, the way an unbiased doula coming into the room that, yes, may have a new relationship with the client, but is not as emotionally tied to the situation. We also understand the stages of labor, what is normal. We know the hospital policies and procedures, what to ask for from a nurse, anything from heat packs to a peanut ball to a birthing stool, and some different tools that a partner may not feel comfortable with. And we also allow grandparents, other support people, partners to take a break, check in on other kids, and know that their wife or partner is supported with a doula there at all times. And, also to go down to the cafeteria. We don't want to have a partner pass out during pushing because they weren't nourishing themselves. They weren't getting water or eating during a longer labor, like an induction, for example. And then after, if there is an issue with baby going to the NICU, the partner usually follows. And then, the birthing person, the woman, is alone And that is a horrible experience to not be with your baby. So a doula stays with our client and the partner is able to go to the NICU. So then we process things. We come up with a plan. If they wanted to breastfeed and things have changed, we talk about pumping and different options, and we hold their hand and we're there for them.
That is huge. That's like the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, just from what I have seen for 21 years, you're lucky. Doctors are lucky. Nurses are lucky. They see the good and the bad. My life really is the bad. So when I hear stuff like this, I'm like, no wonder doulas are not in the cases, because
Right.
you are that second set of eyes. And, I've also talked to a lot of labor and delivery nurses too, over the last 6 months. So I'm like, so how do you guys like doulas? They love you guys. They're like, a good doula? Are you kidding me? I know I'm going to have a good day at work.
Right. Because we support
And
them and check in with them. And I like to, pull the nurse aside and give them some background beyond what the birth plan has about, getting to know their new patient. And so as long as the doula acts in a professional way, I mean, in any profession, there may be some doulas who step out of line, may not have the background in education because there isn't licensure currently for doulas. Anyone can call themselves a doula. And during the pandemic, doulas did need to be certified to go into most hospitals. But, I'm glad that you're hearing good things from labor and delivery nurses, but not all doulas are the same.
Oh, no, 100%. They always preface it with a good doula. A usual, because they, a lot of the labor and delivery nurses know the local doulas. And so they know what that, some particular local doulas are coming in. Again, they're like, my job's going to be easier. They're just so relieved sometimes, and I get it, going in for those are 12-hour shifts they pick up.
Exactly. It's
so when they get to walk in and they, they'll be like, and I have a great doula. It's like this sigh of relief, they said. But 100%, like in every single profession,
right.
There's the good and there's the bad, and you have to be careful. And that's definitely why I started this show saying, you're one of my favorites, because I love what you are doing. I love that you have a podcast where you're families to listen to. You have courses. You just authored that book that we're going to get into in a minute. But before we get into that, since we're right on topic, I wanted to ask you, I mean, how can families pick a good doula?
Oh, it's such a good question, Gina. And part of it is based on personality, that emotional connection. You want someone that you feel comfortable with because birth is such an intimate and vulnerable time. And so that emotional connection, personality fit is helpful. I match all of the doulas, both the birth doulas and postpartum doulas on my team with clients. So I talk about, the experience that they're looking for, any special trainings or skills. So if a client wants a vaginal birth after cesarean, a VBAC, then they're going to want an advanced doula who has a certification in that and can understand how to support that. Or if it is a twin mom or a triplet, like understanding some of the risk levels, or, just if price could be a concern, then a family might be more open to a newer doula. In a Gold Coast, we have newer doulas being mentored by our more seasoned doulas and working along with them, not shadowing, but supporting in pregnancy. So yes, but we have a different tier of pricing for our more seasoned advanced doulas versus the newer certified doulas on our team.
I was wondering about that because I was going to ask experience level, how does that, fit in? Because I can tell you right now, 21 years deep into being a childbirth attorney, I'm way better than, when I was, 5 years into my profession.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, yeah, but then you kind of discount them a little bit. And, I think as long as they have somebody mentoring them from, one of your group, I know, I know you're picky about who you hire, so
I'm very picky.
I
Yes.
know.
So
Yeah, I can see your A type personality. That's
yes,
good. That's good though. We're
absolutely.
dealing with helping to bring babies into this world safely and to help families have a healthy baby. So being picky with that A type personality, I'm in.
Right.
That's awesome. So your book, I've been so excited. We talked a little bit about it in pre-show, and I remember, just whatever, 45 minutes ago going, can you just repeat that when we record? Because it was so perfect. Just learning about your book because, and I don't know if my audience knows the lessons from the childbirth cases, but when I authored my book, I did chapter 1. Chapter 1 are all of the lessons from the childbirth cases, whether it's a lesson from the family, the medical professionals, the delivery team, the experts. These are lessons from the cases. As a lesson, we can prevent it from happening in the future. Lesson number 1 is from the families. And it's you must prepare and you must get ready for childbirth and you must know your options because if you do, you're going to make better decisions. And in these cases, I'm telling you, sometimes it's decisions, just one decision or minutes from a healthy baby. So understanding your options, understanding everything about, not everything, but preparing for childbirth is absolutely huge. And boom, you wrote a great book. And tell me more about it. And tell us the title one more time.
So Supported, Your Guide to Birth and Baby. And I did not find anything in my research like our book. And our book is based on our online course, Becoming a Mother, which is, again, prepping for birth and baby equally. I feel like there may be a lot of preparation with baby showers and, all of the appointments with your provider, but the postpartum phase is often neglected. And so we wanted to put as much emphasis about assembling the dream team after baby arrives, as well as your pregnancy and birth dream team.
Yeah, so I like that. I love Dream Team. Again, I talk about it in my book because, listen, the delivery team is responsible for bringing your baby safely into this world. And I literally state, I list 3 types of teams, delivery teams that I have encountered, year after year in the cases. And I'm basically like, number 1, that this is the one you want your dream team. So anyway, what is your take on a dream team for childbirth?
So everything from, if there are health concerns, a dietitian, seeing a physical therapist, and understanding all of the options for education. And I get into classes and self-paced videos if, our readers are not interested in taking a class, then some good resources of books to read, podcasts to listen to, like your own, that can give evidence-based information. And then some trusted sites, and there are apps that can be very helpful in pregnancy, like Count the Kicks app, for example. We talk about that.
Yes.
To ensure that baby is moving in between those appointments in case anything happens. And so it varies, and having a provider that you trust and understanding the hospitals, like rates for surgical births and so on, and making sure that you have an appropriate level NICU if you are very high risk, and just looking at all of the options from, cord blood donation, cord blood banking, to understand the importance of car seat safety, especially with our grandparents class, educating grandparents if they are the caregiver, which with the child care shortage, oftentimes they are. So there's a difference in safe sleep. There's a difference in feeding, since our grandparents last, fed babies most likely. And then certainly understanding childproofing and how to, properly put a child into a car seat.
Super important.
Yes.
So that's good stuff. Sleeping stuff. I love the Kick Count app. That is just so huge.
It is.
So sometimes when, families come in and, something's up with baby, they report decreased fetal movement. So I'm just an
Yes.
absolute huge fan of kick counts. I'm sure I'll do an episode on it.
Great.
So anyway, love that. So yeah, I mean, I think with a good dream team, you got to make sure when you roll up, my take on it too, is when you roll up to the hospital and you're like, okay, who's scheduled to work that day? And then hopefully you get that good nurse. I mean, here's the deal too. If you don't like your nurse, and listen, I love labor and delivery nurses.
So do
They,
I. Big fan.
they are some of my favorite people. They are absolutely huge. But basically, if you roll up though to the hospital and you're not comfortable with your nurse, it is important, I think, to say something or whatnot. If there's residents that you may be uncomfortable with, because, residents are doctors in training. So if you're, not comfortable with them, again, important to say stuff like that. But yeah. So I loved your the take on the dream team. I think definitely, having a doula, having a great doctor. I think also having having a family member there who understands what's going on with childbirth. Again, dad, grandparents. It could be aunt, best friend, whoever is
Absolutely.
definitely huge. But just following your instincts and intuition when you get there. I mean, is huge. So okay. Oh, I love this part. So your book also, I believe each chapter, you then tell a story, a story about a client or whatnot. Could you tell us maybe one of your favorite client stories around childbirth that's in the book? Or you know what? It doesn't even have to be in the book. If you just have a different one.
So I like to compare birth to a marathon. And one of my former clients, I worked with her 2 times, she happens to be a marathon runner. And so she used her use of visualization in races and compared it to childbirth and how she prepared for her birth. So I love that example, and using the breath work that you do as an athlete, and understanding all of the preparation you do before a race, mentally and physically, and how you need to nourish your body, be hydrated, how all of that plays into your odds are better for a successful birth if you've done the preparation during pregnancy. So again, athletes fuel their body with healthy food. They're not giving in to cravings for Burger King every day, for example.
So true. So
Yes.
true. And I love what you're saying. And that's going to be definitely some future episodes, because, when I wrote my book, it's more of, like we have chapter 11, and that's the common issues, the common facts, things that when things go wrong, this is typically what we see in a case, just to help give parents a heightened sense of awareness, activate their intuition. But since I published my book, what I've really been focusing on is the opposite. What's not in my childbirth cases? And again, it's a lot of what you just said, the team who may be there or what you're doing beforehand to prepare yourself for childbirth, is just, there's just so many different things that families can do. And I love it because you're such a great resource for that information. I mean, they just come to you and you're like, okay, this is what we need to know before childbirth. This is what we need to know to get you ready for the big day. And
Exactly.
yeah, it's huge, because then they do have a better chance of successfully delivering, the baby. So I just love it. I love
And
all this
even if the
information.
outcomes are not what our clients desire, there is so much evidence that doulas reduce interventions. But also, one of the key factors in hiring a doula is you will have increased satisfaction. And that evidence shows that continuous support from a doula, both emotionally, physically, and with resources, makes the difference. Because as you mentioned, labor and delivery nurses are amazing. Providers are in and out, but hospitals can be very busy. So having the eyes on you and baby in a non-medical way again, and working as a team with the medical support to ensure that, again, the mother isn't left alone in a room after she just delivered a baby who's in the NICU.
Oh yeah. No, and like you said earlier, I mean, you guys speak the language of the delivery team. While you may not be giving it medical advice, you know a lot of the same stuff that the medical team knows. So it's just so incredibly important and great that what you guys are doing. So what is like one piece of advice that you would give to expecting parents on, how to have a safer childbirth?
Trust your instincts. If something feels off, call your doctor, whether it's during pregnancy or after you deliver. I mean, there can be complications that come up for our clients physically after delivery. And then also for baby. So contact the pediatrician, trust your instincts. Even as new moms, we still know our body and know the movements of our baby in the womb better than anyone else. So again, with the Count to Kicks app, like just if something feels off, call right away.
Oh yeah. That's interesting. That's in book 2. But so yes, I felt like when I was pregnant with my 3 that my maternal instincts were on overdrive. I mean, I was in mama bear protection mode since they were like teeny weeny, babies in me. So yeah, and I wish somebody would have been like, follow your instincts more and whatnot. Now, obviously, as we age, we do tend to follow them more, but, nobody was telling me to follow them. So, I think initially was more of just, okay, even with knowing what I know. But then again, I was really picky about my doctor. So
right.
I made sure we were on the exact same page because obviously I wanted a very low risk, not take chances type doctor. So
exactly.
Yeah. But Kristen, I just absolutely love everything that you are doing to help families and whatnot. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. And can you tell my audience where can they find you?
So our website is goldcoastdoulas.com. And we do serve in person in West Michigan for birth and postpartum. We work day and overnight postpartum support in northern Michigan as well as southwest Michigan, so all those lakeshore towns. And we offer many virtual services, including our Becoming a Mother course. Almost all of our classes are virtual. And then, of course, the book and podcast give you information. So we wanted to write the book to give people who couldn't afford a doula or couldn't afford to be in our class the same information that we're able to provide. And Supported will be, available in paperback, hardcover. There'll be an ebook, as well as by mid-June, we'll have an audio book. So we'll be on Audible.
That is great. And I love how you just ended it with, hey, let's say you can't do the classes, you can't hire the doula. Don't worry, I gotcha for, I know books aren't too crazy expensive, but here's another resource for you. So I love what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Gina. I'm honored, and I appreciate the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kristen. She is an absolutely amazing human, amazing doula. So I hope that you do check out her information. And I hope that you do check out her book, especially if you're not in Michigan and you're somewhere else in the United States, wherever, or around the world. Check out her book. It has great, great information. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you want to find out more about what I'm doing, you can always hit up the website, ginamundy.com. and social media. Feel free to reach out. My favorite is Instagram. And if you ever need to email me for any reason, email is on the website, but since I keep saying it, it's gm@ginamundy.com. At this point, it still goes to my phone, and I'll be happy to respond quickly. So thank you so much for tuning in, and make sure you're giving your kids hugs and kisses and enjoying every day. Thanks again.